Hello everyone, Max here with Fiction Rant to talk with you all about the Death Star and how it's not the power flex that people think it is. Also, I have links to my coffee and merch store in the description if you'd like to support the channel, along with a new Patreon where I'm going to be hosting discussion regarding the Protoss versus Eldar debate that I have been avoiding. So, just in case you're aware, the Death Star and its copies are gigantic battle stations that share the key feature of a superlaser capable of destroying a planet, or in the case of Starkiller Base, multiple planets. And it's not just destroy the planet, it's full-on pulverize them. So they're pretty impressive in that way. But they're often held up as the ultimate trump card in debates. So you'll get things like, well, if the Borg invaded the Star Wars galaxy, well then the Death Star would just one-shot the cube and the invasion would be over like that. Which is totally true, assuming of course you're talking about the second Death Star with its improved targeting, and assuming that the Borg are stupid enough to actually approach the thing from the side that has the gigantic obvious weapon. In any case, the overwhelming power of the Death Star superlasers isn't something that somebody actually debates. We get to see in the original movie how a single shot pulverized an Earth-like planet in about a second. The thing is, so? They built a battle station the size of a small moon. Of course it can dish out some serious punishment. Really, the impressive part is that they could actually pull together the resources and logistics to actually construct such a thing in the first place. Destroying a planet, or at least wiping out all life on said planet though, that's not actually that impressive if you've already got a spacefaring civilization. Just deorbit some local asteroids and you'll do enough damage to cause an extinction event. Just ask the dinosaurs. I'll put it this way. Putting in that much resources to do something as simple as wiping out all life on a planet is the sci-fi equivalent to me, a scrawny nerd, beating Shaquille O'Neal at basketball because I paid him $1 trillion to sit on the bench and just watch. Sure, it'll work, but there's way easier ways to do the same thing, and the impressive part isn't me beating Shaq at basketball at that point, it's me getting $1 trillion together in the first place. So what is a power flex then? It's needing relatively minimal effort or resources to cause massive destruction. The Celestial Orrery from Warhammer 40k, a device that allows the user to not only monitor events anywhere in the galaxy in real time, but also move or destroy stars at will, that's a flex. Not because it's inexpensive, we have no idea what kind of resources went into it, but because it can be used to great effect with minimal effort. No massive crew, no putting yourself into the line of fire, just tap and a star goes nova. Simple as that. Or how about trilithium torpedoes from Star Trek Generations? Developed by one dude in the equivalent of his garage with only the resources he could gather or trade for, and then launched from a homemade platform on a planet. He could launch a torpedo at a star, get it to go nova. Only one shot needed and not even a ship required. And developed without the support of a governmental R&D department. That's the equivalent to the Manhattan Project being conducted and executed by a hermit who lives in the mountains and just got it in his head to invent nuclear weapons and then built several that actually function and then successfully deployed several prior to anyone noticing and stopping him. Well, how about the Doctor device from Ender's Game? Sure, it's super advanced tech, but it was developed in record time by humanity following the First Formic War, and then deployed with every counter-offensive fleet that humanity deployed. For the uninitiated, the Doctor device is a weapon that causes a self-propagating effect that inhibits electron sharing between atoms, causing all molecules in the affected area to just disintegrate. If used against tight fleet formations, it just one-shots the fleet, because the propagation effect will spread that far. If used against planets, it blows up the planet in an unstoppable chain reaction, and that was developed in less than a decade. So here we have 4 weapons: an observatory that allows you to blow up stars with the touch of a button while never getting off your couch, a supernova torpedo developed by a crazy hermit in his garage, and a planet killer that was developed in a few years and then mounted on whatever tiny ships humanity could cobble together in that time, and then a freaking moon-sized station that can do the same thing as the Doctor device, but arguably worse since it's less effective versus fleets and requires multiple fleets worth of resources and personnel to build and operate. Okay, not actually arguably worse, just objectively worse. So which would you be more concerned with if you were running an interplanetary civilization? Sure, they're all dangerous, but there's a reason why bang for your buck is a common phrase. The amount of resources to pay off from the Death Star is insanely not in your favor. Star Wars Legends even seem to recognize this problem, even if Disney Star Wars didn't. Instead of building bigger and badder Death Stars, Legends pivoted to things like World Devastators, which were basically nigh-indestructible factories that would tear apart planets for materials while pumping out endless streams of war material and repairing themselves. They were still large, over 3 kilometers in length, but not only were they far smaller than any of the Death Stars, but they also actually did something productive with the devastation that they caused. Or how about the Sun Crusher? That thing was only 13.5 meters long, but was made with quantum armor that made it impervious to all Star Wars weaponry, and could even allow the ship to fly into stars where it could deploy resonance torpedoes that would either cause the star to go nova, or when directed against ships, it would just one-shot them or cause significant damage. That is pretty dang scary. That's a shuttle that can one-shot stars. Contextually, though, that's actually pretty dang stupid, since it's not only too powerful for Star Wars, considering everything else going on, but it also runs into the Holdo maneuver problem of, well, if you could do that, why only once? Sure, the quantum armor might have been prohibitively expensive, but you can make a tiny resonance torpedo that'll one-shot a capital ship. That's pretty dang valuable, and cost be damned at that point. The cost-effectiveness is kind of inherent in that, so why not equip a bunch of other ships with resonance torpedoes? Why are we seeing them only on the Sun Crusher? It's a bit like saying, well, we introduced Goku into the Star Wars universe, and we're just going to assume that it's all fine. No, the impact of that is pretty gigantic. Honestly, the Sun Crusher is what you get when a pair of 9-year-old boys are bickering on the playground about whose Lego starship is more powerful, but it's still far scarier than any Death Star, in part because it's just not as cumbersome. And in part because once the technology is developed, it wouldn't cost even a fraction of what a moon-size battle station would cost. It doesn't matter how expensive that armor is, it doesn't cost as much as building an entire moon, especially since that moon requires special materials like freaking kyber crystals, which are hyper rare, especially the ones of the size that were needed to be able to actually make the Death Star function. Anyway, going back to my Shaq comparison, the Sun Crusher is akin to beating Shaq at basketball because you started the game by shooting him in both legs. Still not exactly fair play, but far less resource intensive than paying $1 trillion to sit him on the bench. I could go on and on about weapons and superweapons in sci-fi that are or are not a flex based on their availability and cost, but I'll spare you. And instead, I'll turn the floor over to you. What do you all think? Let me know in the comments. Again, I have links to my Patreon, Coffee, and Fourth Wall in the merch store in the description if you'd like to support the channel or just pick up a cool t-shirt or mug. Patreon, again, is where I would like to start tackling the Protoss versus Eldar matchup that I've teased a couple times, but I've been honestly scared to actually do it. Basically, my community seems to be way better informed on both of those factions than I am, and so if we can kind of hash out the details on Patreon, then I could actually put together a good series, my standard matchup series of 8 parts, and try to actually do the matchup justice. So if you'd like to get in on the debate, consider supporting for just $1 a month. And until next time, live long and prosper, and may the Force be with you.